Thanks for coming. I'm super excited to be here. I did a little jogging here to arrive. Sorry it was a bit late. So as Tom introduced me to you, I didn't know what industrial design was till I moved here. So before that, I studied many different things, from art classes to physics and lots of different majors that looked interesting, and I just take one. So when I moved to San Francisco, I had a coworker who was studying industrial design, and while we were talking, I got excited. I never heard of it before, so I went home that night and looked up the course, and it seemed very interesting because it was, as you guys know, it's industrial design really engaged two parts of our brains where we use analytical thinking as well as creative thinking, and I really like that. So after I graduated industrial design from San Francisco State University, I decided to do my own thing right away. I am originally from Turkey, and I wanted to do kids brand, kids leather shoes brand, and the leggings and socks for kids. So I went to Turkey and spent 3 months there. Tried to figure out the manufacturing, and because of the quantities that I wanted to produce was low, because I was sort of trying to bootstrap, right? So it was pretty hard to figure it out in there. The craftsmen that I wanted to work with were not used to the quantities I wanted, but then I wasn't ready to go into big manufacturing. So I sort of, I didn't have a bandwidth, so I stopped that at that moment. Then I came back to San Francisco, and I started applying for industrial design jobs directly, junior industrial design positions. And it was hard. So I think one of the things that made it even harder for me, because I didn't do an internship, right? So during the school, I had a baby. So I didn't really have time to do an internship. So when I applied for junior industrial designer positions, I didn't have out-of-school experience. So I started thinking, I still wanted to do design, and I want to work. So I started applying for other design positions that, I had a laptop, I had the creative suits already, and, I wasn't necessarily as good as a graphic designer, but I knew how to do, and I could self-teach a lot of stuff. So then I was able to get through the creative agencies, I was able to get contract positions. So, which brings me to talk to you guys about, there are some different ways to go now. Traditionally we graduate and we find a full-time job, right? And that's a bit changing right now. There's all these things. There are freelancers, there are contractors, there are consultants. That there are other ways to go around finding the work you want to do. So I wanted to just introduce you that. So freelancers are usually projects that are short amount of time, and then maybe about 4 weeks or so, and that, and maybe you're just doing a logo design for a client, 15 hours, in 1 week or 3 days, and that's it. And the contractors are you get to put on a project in a certain amount of time. That could be from 3 months to 6 months. For example, I've done a contract for Apple. That was 1.5 months, the shortest contract I ever done, and the longest one I've done in a travel company in Berkeley, which was about 6 months. And the third thing is a consultant. So consulting is usually when you have an expertise on something. People do, very in a certain area, and it will include more of a strategy and / design. So, and you might sometimes execute on the strategy that you develop. So to give an example to that, I've done a freelance consulting for a skin company, a skincare company in San Francisco, where I worked with the client directly, and we worked on a packaging and brand strategy, and when I've sent out the final graphics to the company where they got printed out and everything. So it's more of a little bit more ahead, when you go in maybe in a few years, you could definitely get there, right? Okay, so now I want to talk to you guys about creative contracting through creative agencies, because that's the way I got into design, right? So these companies, they're outside companies, and they recruit, employees for their clients. So how they work is that, they mark up what you make. Usually, like, let's say you're making $30 an hour, they actually mark you out as a $60 an hour to their client, and they get the half of it, and then you get the half of it. So you may be wondering, well, why should we even get going through that, right? Because it's like, I'm the one who's doing the work. Why should I give 50%? Why should they take half of that? The thing is with them, there are a lot of advantages that I found out for myself, right? So let's look into those a little bit. So it's faster to get jobs through contracting, like using these creative agencies, because for them, they have a huge financial incentive. They need to find a client to an employee that could, meet all their criteria, and for them to make money, they need to, fill those positions very efficiently and fast. So they work on that pretty hard. The disadvantages that I saw, because of the nature of this kind of work, that can be most of the work could be in execution or production roles that needs to, help quickly. For example, maybe like they're working on a campaign for seasonal, like Christmas time, right? And they need a digital web designer, and so they want someone that just will come into the house and work 40 hours a week for 3 months, and get the job done. So there might be some exceptions to the rule, right? With everything that we go through, there's always someone with outside experience. But most of the time, in my personal experience, these companies are mainly interested in getting someone in-house quickly with the least effort and training. So they want, if you're a contractor, that you need to go in there and just sort of get the things quick and, get the ball rolling, kind of get the ball rolling. So it is important to see this stage as what it is, right? This is not there's nothing wrong with gaining experience through doing these jobs and sort of changing around often, and it's just a temporary learning experience, and you're just building your skills. It is not a sustainable or a desirable way to continue grow your career in the long run. Okay, so I think that so far, like I've been working from startups projects to big companies like Apple or Elation. So while my technical skills got definitely better, I think the most important thing I would say it would be on the side of my emotional intelligence and my soft skills, right? I didn't actually even know what an emotional intelligence. I started, going through these jobs. So as you go through these different work experiences, you start to be more observant in order to figure out the dynamics of the place, about the different cultures, about how people communicate and relate to one another. You'll adapt the environment during your stay there, which will help you to become a more versatile designer and a human being. So all these different short-term contracts, you develop a list of, you'll also develop a list of values and environments and cultures and really ideas about the work that you want to do and the work that you don't like to do. So then every decision that will come after that will get better informed and be more intentional. Okay, so I wanted to give you guys an example of the time that I worked with a startup as a contract designer. It was one of the first contracts I did. It was with a supplement company down in South Solito, but they're actually based in Copenhagen. They had an office here. Because the team was so small, so I had to do put on a lot of different hats. That would include, sitting with the business lead and talking about campaign development, targeting, and design. And so there was a lot of exposure to all aspects of design, not just making something pretty, but what are we trying to do and how are we going to sell this? How are we going to execute it? So that was, I think, looking back when I was preparing the slides, I think it was one of my favorite ones. I really felt like that was informative to sort of build who I am, and just looking at things, what is the social media marketing, email newsletter, campaign development, just really fun things. Okay. So I wanted to sort of come to, so this is like what happens after, the part that I talked about, what happens after you graduate, right? So now we could look into some things I thought that was important, like how could we start that now? Like how could we act like a professional now, right? We don't need to wait till we finish school. So one of the things I think is very critical is giving feedback, right? So show up for each other. When you put your work up there for presentation, like do speak up. Do speak up for your friends, give feedback. Why does that matter? That matters because every time you speak up to give feedback to someone, you help them, you question their concepts and you help them think differently. And that's a great way of practicing empathy, courage, teamwork, and critical thinking and listening skills, which will be very important once you get out of school. Because when you're working, you guys will all experience that there's going to be a lot of client management and understanding what your boss wants and why does he want that. And you need to start like influencing people without like being, this is the idea I like. So you want to develop a sort of a approved approach, like how to influence without the authority. So I think it's very important, And the second thing I want to talk to you guys about is storytelling. So when we show up, when we talk, when we deliver, we are always telling stories. So we're telling stories about ourselves, our values, our goals, what we want to do. So I just want to tell you that, like, be intentional on that and be aware, right? So what do you want people to think about? What is your goal when you're trying to deliver a message? And like today I'm here to tell you guys a story about what are the pathways that you could do if you didn't, get a full-time job right after school. And accepting where we are, but always trying to harvest, like, what is the learning opportunity in this new place that I'm in. I'm telling you that, like, I'm a professional who's capable and have courage to, always move forward, and a person who is not scared of getting out of their comfort zone, right? By showing up here. So, and that story would be different if I was speaking to a CEO of a company or if I was trying to get a job. Because my audience is different and I'm trying to do something totally different with that. And the third thing is being a connector. This can be practiced like anywhere. You don't need a job as well for this. Just like connecting to people, like you might be in the, you're doing a footwear design, and then you have a friend that wants to like do this cool animation around the shoes that turns around like 24 or something, like 24-degree angle, or, and you know someone who does it in the animation department, right? Like you had another friend. So connect those people to each other, because people talk about a lot like these networks after you graduate, and I want to bring that like we don't need to be thinking about like we're building a safety net, but we need to think about like how am I being helpful and valuable? I use like many of these like really nice professional looking mock-ups through these websites. I thought maybe it will be useful for you guys. Please feel free to take a photo. I'm still editing this particular slide, so you might receive an updated version like with more stuff. So they're all free websites, and there are some thought leaders that, oh, nice. So there are some thought leaders that I love, like the Seth Godin, Brené Brown, like she talks about vulnerability, and the Simon Sinek, like starting with why. And they're just good to look into it and just open up your horizons. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's always a good way to engage in a more bigger audience. So this is my last slide. So I wanted to share with you guys this quote that I read a few months ago. And I'm a person, I forget things a lot, like because English is not my second language, and I'll just like kill the quotes all the time. But this one really sticks with me as a full sentence. So I wanted to share with you guys, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs are the people who have come alive. So if all of us went today to the world, right, like do your passions, and we would be much more fulfilled and happier. And then we can create this place that feels supportive and just with happy people. That's it. Thank you.
As a undergraduate student, are there any barriers for the recruiting agencies that you talked about?
Are there any barriers?
Barriers for undergraduate students.
Nope, there is none. Yeah. I think you could totally do it. So the good thing is about with the recruiters, that I didn't also mention, once you find one that like you work together and once you've done a lot of project for them, they sort of keep you in mind. And like I've gotten a lot of things I didn't apply for, and they will be like, oh, we have this position, I think you'll be a great fit. And yeah, there is no recruitment. I think like just having the hard skills and then just the enthusiasm, and then you'll be good to go. Thank you.
I have a question which is not based on skills, but more of in terms of when you're starting as a new fresh graduate, you're mostly scared. Everything is blur.
Of course.
And you're basically the future is like, I don't know what's going to happen to me after this.
Yeah.
How do you get past that? What was your motivation, first of all, to become, to take a decision that you are going to be by yourself?
Yeah.
And what's your drive?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So there is definitely a lot of fear, right? Like when we are trying to do something new that we haven't done before, we are all scared. Like I'm very scared right now to be here because I haven't done this before. But, I talk myself and sort of like a crazy person. We have to like, whenever there's fear or we're nervous, I always think that that's a great opportunity for me to go towards it instead of run back. Because the growth really happens like when we are not sure and when we're scared and when we just show up, right? Like, so for example, to just give you, like today I was scared, I was like thinking about it 2 weeks, how am I gonna do this? And then I started thinking about like, what would I feel after this conversation ends? Like that, let's focus on that feeling of like, that like, oh, that was so great. Like, I felt like valuable. I felt like I would contributed, right? Like I didn't know about like all these thought leaders that I shared with you guys. I didn't know about like there was all these different ways that you could go find a job, right? Like I've had friends who told me, well, when are you going to find a real job? Because, they kind of sort of look down on a contracting positions. But that was their problem, right? I needed to listen to my inner self and then believe that like, the only way to move forward is just like take these steps, and it could be incremental, it could be huge, we don't know. And there's really nothing, nothing to lose but to gain a new experience, a new way of looking. And I can tell you, like, I've changed tremendously, and I'm not, I'm not a person who just graduated from school. I'm sort of a late bloomer, I took a break from school. And so just to go forward, if you want, you need to just get more of those uncomfortable places. And it does get easier. It's so cliche and everyone says that, like with the public speaking, for example, like the more you do it, the more you show up, it doesn't get easier, but you feel better and stronger. I don't know. Was that a good answer? Yeah, of course. Anyone else?
So what I'd like to ask is, I saw you work in pretty different areas.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering how you apply the training of industrial and knowledge of industrial design to apply the those different aspects.
Areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's an awesome question. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. So I am a bias, of course, because I've studied industrial design, right? I trained for that. So I think we rock. Like the things that I've been doing more of on the sort of pivoted a little bit more of a graphic, digital design things, but it's all there is this fundamental way of like problem solving is a fundamental thing, right? Like critical thinking. And I think the more we challenge ourselves with like new ways of doing things, like the ones that are especially we don't know at first, the stronger it gets. So I think like for me, like being a curious person, and the problem solving aspect of it is the same, right? Like if you were designing a chair, you look into ergonomics, you look into why does this chair should exist? You're like, what am I trying to solve in here? And you do all this questioning, and then you do your target market research, competitive analysis, all these like technical stuff, right? We do. And it's the same for the digital too. Like, you know, I'm like, well, I'm making like, I would get like posters, like, oh, could you make like this event poster for, and I would always be like, well, who are we selling to? What are we trying to tell? What is the story? Like, I need to know more. That, I think the training of actually industrial design really prepares you to be able to do multiple things, you know. So it's that problem solving skill that, like, you know, you apply to everything, and the more different. It's funny that you asked that. You know, I did met with this is just like an extra information to share with you guys. I did met the owner of the Astro Studios yesterday. It's a design company in San Francisco. And, you know, I was talking to him about like how many different things I've done. And he's, you know, I said, what do you think for a designer? Like, do you think that's hurting me? Like, is that like something I should really be funnel into one thing and just get good at that? And he said, you know, when I hire designers, I look at them how good of a problem solver they are. It's not really like what you do. It's like a way of way of looking at things. That's like really the most critical, right? Because that person has a potential, then you get that. Thank you for asking. Hi.
I want to ask, how did you advertise yourself? Like,
how did I? Sorry.
Advertise yourself. How did you put yourself out there?
Oh.
Like, because everyone here is a designer. Everyone sketches.
Yeah.
And everyone has an Instagram account. Everyone has a website.
Totally.
Is there any other way, you know, we can advertise ourselves that's different from the usual? You know?
Yeah, totally. So, you know, this is like, I'm going to borrow some things from Seth Godin, the thought leader you guys all should look up, you know. He talks about like how to become a remarkable designer, right? There is a lot of people doing a lot of what we do, and now we are a global market. Like, you know, I could hire someone and through Upwork, like, would do the thing in India, and I bet you they will be much better in SolidWorks than I am, you know, because they're just like pro at it. That's not my strength. Like, I don't want to, so I think about it in a way like, what is it, I can't just like try to swim to the bottom, right? Like, to be the cheapest. So the price is not a thing. Like, you know, don't get into there where offering things for cheaply because you want to make a difference. So I think the key is like, how do we become remarkable what we do? And that could mean like, it's not just your craft, but it's also your like soft skills, right? Like your relationship building skills, that, you know, you meeting with a client and looking them in the eye and then trying to really help them and try to bring value. I think like people will respond to that. You know, when we know someone is trying to do their best and they're trying to make a difference for us, right? Like, we just feel much more comfortable with that person right away. And so I think it's there. Like, I don't know if that was even a good tip, you know, but I think just like for me, like, when we think the world in an abundance place, like when there's so much and it's all good, then we don't have to be in such a competition, like to try to get things and try to make ourselves different with, you know, with certain things. And I think we just need to trust, and we just need to try to be the best we can, and then we will attract those people, you know. Yeah, that might have sounded a little bit woo-woo, so, you know. Thank you.
So my question is regarding being a contractor and a full-time employee. I think for most of us, we're trying to be a full-time employee.
Yeah.
And I looked through your LinkedIn real quick, and most of it is like a contractor job. Is that a new thing now? Like, what's the benefits for you versus being a contractor and being a full-time employee? Is it you're not looking for a full-time employment job, or?
Yeah, that's. Thank you for reframing that question. So I did, you know, when I finished school, I did want to have a full-time job, right? That's sort of like what we all working for, in a way, to get the best design job. Like, it would be so cool to work in Tesla, you know, or Apple. But the way now the companies are doing work that I've come across, that, you know, they don't really want to hire full-time employees, because then they have to give benefits and they have, you know, all these like things that they need to like invest in. So there's much more, I found that there was much more, a contracting position is more available because it's a short time and they don't really give you any benefits. so it was easier to get. But I think for me, there is nothing wrong applying for jobs full time, right? What I would say that you don't need to just wait around for a company to call you that you apply. Like you apply to Apple, you apply to Google. These are all great, right? Places to work. But we don't need to wait for them to contact us. We could actually. There's a point that comes when you do these even though 3 months projects, right? Like I've done now for almost 5 years these contracting jobs. There's a lot of in and flow, so there's a negative effect. I don't have consistent income because sometimes 2 months it takes me to get on a new project, and sometimes it's 5 months. But it also you gain so much experience that then they started calling you. Like I've had a interview with one of the tech companies that was for a UX design consulting position, and I was super excited. I was like, oh my god, this is going to be a paid MBA, and I climbed up to the 3rd, 4th rank of interviews, and it went great. I didn't get it, but I was just this is great because that happened because I didn't stop. I didn't just wait around and then for them to call me. They actually headhunted me on LinkedIn and then contacted me. But that's because I'm proactive, right? I am doing, even though these are small jobs and there's a lot of technical stuff, there will be opportunities where you get to say things or you get to see your creative director dealing with your CEO. And then you're like, oh, that is a really effective way of getting things rolling. And you learn a lot. But it wasn't a choice that I made at school. I didn't think, oh, I'm going to be a contractor because I just want to work sort of like the squirrels, during the winter. I mean, summer work hard and winter time rest. It wasn't like that. Yeah. Thank you.
As you know, we do not know what will happen after we graduate and in designer world. And that brings us fear. And you said that we need to take that step and go forward. Yeah. What helps you to stand up or comes out from that fear? Was it for example, being a connector helps also?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is a really good, very practical question. You nailed it. I think I definitely do that. I definitely connect my friends for a job, when I would be doing something, and if I don't have time for a job that comes up, I'm like, oh, I can't do it, but I know someone that could do it, so I will reach out. That just makes me feel good. That I don't think, that makes me feel comfortable, but I think it just makes me feel good, and I like that feeling, being helpful. But it is hard, I have to say, when you're looking for something and it's not happening a month. And I'm, as you guys are all, right, you're very creative. I do a lot of self-projects to kind of soothe my nerves. I build up a climbing wall in my apartment. I build up a swing from the ceiling, just because I'm a maker and I need to do something, and that was a great way of doing, getting art helps, just meeting with other people. There are a lot of people that you will find out that loves giving informational meetings. The one I had yesterday was sort of an informational meeting, just kind of knowing what's he up to, how is he doing. And that's been happening a lot to me right now. I've had another one with another industrial designer. Getting out of your, meeting with other people. So the other things I when I don't have job and I just looking for something, I go into this Eventbrite. I don't know if you guys know that website. They're they have an app that you can look up these talks. I went to one last week about AI for mental health, how AI could help for mental health. I thought it was interesting, and so I showed up, just met with lots of people and just listened to talk. So just giving your brain some occupation, you occupy yourself still with something and growing and learning, that helps. During that a time that where you're looking for a job. But it is stressful, for sure. But it's part of the way, right? This is the way things work. We go through these hard times, and then we grow out of it, and then there comes the next project. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer to say, but just get out of your, space, go meet other people. You don't even need to talk. You could go to these events, just to listen, like just to like podcasts. I put on my earphone and I like wash my dishes, you know, clean up my bathroom, and I'm like listening someone else's thoughts. Like how are they thinking and how are they looking, and most of them are just like random, you know, not even about design, which is the most great thing about, you know, right? We're interested in many different things.
If you don't do anything in a design related or some sort of job training on a real job, and 6 months, 8 months gone by, and then you're hoping that you're going to get a job, your chance of getting a job is reducing by the longer you are out of the job. So get anything you can get a hands on being an actual working professional.
Yeah.
Because first year or so, to the company point of view, we have to train you for the professional life. And you've done that with other jobs. They think, oh, I don't have to do a training, means they don't have to waste their money or time. They can put you on a job right away. So don't idle. That's one thing you should avoid, okay? That's the one thing. And she said a contract is good, but it's not really like a whole thing. You know, they are just give you a portion of it.
It's a start, right? It's a good
the
start.
reason the company go to contract is, one, you don't have that particular skill sets, then look for the particular skill sets for that particular project, right? Not a long term, but you needed that skill sets to get a job done. They go outside, or they have enough work that have to overflow, but they don't really want to hire a permanent guy. Because if the permanent position takes about twice the money to just get the one contractor, to have the benefits and all that. If you're making $40,000, that means $80,000 to the company, bookkeeping wise. So that's why they are trying to avoid creating extra headcounts if you can avoid it. So those are the reasons why they go to contract. Okay, so just remember that. But if you remember why they are needing you for, and if you have way of adjusting your portfolios and stuff, you got more chance to get a job. Okay? And that one slide you had, the emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Okay, that slide, she did it as a independent or a freelancer.
Yes.
But that works in a workplace too. You know, that whole attitude and whole learning, that works in a real workplace too.
Yeah. It just is like a faster in the, when you are doing
it's a fact of life.
When you're doing contracting, like you go through different places and then it wasn't like, it's not comfortable, right? Every time you go into this new place, you have to sort of fit in and then, but also have a stand. A lot goes on, but you learn, you will get better and better the more you do it. And it's, I didn't personally think that was a gain. But looking back, I think that's like the most important. Like I didn't know what an emotional intelligence was till maybe last year. I'd be like, I'm thinking about credibility now. I'm sitting down in this meeting and thinking, when should I voice my concern? Like how much of it would be listened, and how much of it would be paid attention? Because I'm just a contractor, but I also am a professional, right? I have experience in this. But these kind of things I didn't think about like 2 years ago. So with time, just having experience, even though they're short, it's just so valuable for you. And you will really, it's a good way to check off a list. Like, I don't like this sort of job. I don't like this kind of thing. Like, I don't like micromanagement. That was a good thing. Like, I found out on my last contract. So then you will know better, when you're going for the next thing. You'll ask better questions and just prepare better. Yeah, thank you.